You're listening to Living Free, your podcast for a life full of freedom and magic. I'm your host, Tanja Hirsch, and I hope that every time you listen, you feel a little bit more inspired to follow your intuition and to create a life beyond your wildest dreams. Welcome back to the Living Free podcast, my loves. I'm so excited you're tuning in today, and I'm over the moon to share this interview with you with Melinte. So Melinte and I have met in the jungle of Costa Rica in a hippie commune 2017, when I just lost my yoga studio. I just left my emotional abusive relationship, and we both had a very different experience back then, but she was one of the only people I really connected with. She always felt like this beautiful, radiant goddess in the jungle, walking through the green, lush nature. And yeah, after all these years, we never lost touch. We kind of stayed connected. And today I have her on the show, and I'm really excited to share her magic with you. But before I introduce her, I have a reminder that I have a podcast giveaway right now. So if you love this content, if this podcast, if my work has expanded you, inspired you, has helped you on your journey, I would love to read your words from the heart, why you would recommend this podcast to someone, because I would love to share this work with the world, to bring it to more women. So it would mean the world to me if you join this giveaway. You can win epic prizes. There's 5 spots for my closing 2022 ceremony, end of December, where we go together through this crazy wild ride of 2022. We will integrate the lessons and the blessing together through a deep journey through the year, so we can move into the new year with integrity and excitement and gratitude and openness and trust, and also clarity. So there's also another prize where you can win a home retreat of your choice. There's different options. I have 5 different home retreats that you can win. So join the giveaway by simply leaving a review on the Apple Podcast, and send me a screenshot on Instagram or through my website before you hit send, and I put you in the pot. I'm gonna draw the winner on the 12th of December, so make sure to join this epic giveaway. It would mean the world. I will read every single review. And now let's dive into the episode. So I spoke with Melinte about feminine magnetism, about her personal journey, about what it took her to come back into alignment, actually we dove into so many epic things that I already forgot because it was a really deep conversation. So Melinte is a mentor for women, and she's guiding women on their sacred path, on their spiritual journeys, to integrate not only the light but also the shadow. She's the embodiment of holding both, and we also talked about that in the interview, and how to live the full expression of life. And we also dived into this really deep, that only if we stop chasing the light and also embrace our darkness, we come back into our magnetism and into our wholeness, and what it takes to really go there and meet yourself there. So she helps women to come into their full expression of who they are and to expand into abundance, success, love, and create the life of their dreams. So without further ado, let's welcome Melinte to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Melinte. I'm so excited to have you today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Yes. And be speaking to you after all this time,
Yeah, it's been 5 years. We just talked about it. It's crazy how much has happened, but also how quickly time flies.
Yeah.
Since it's in the jungle in Costa Rica.
Yes.
So the first question I ask all of my podcast guests: what does living free mean to you right now?
Yeah. So for me, that means waking up in the morning and being able to drop into deep sacred practices, to meditate, to journal, to connect with myself, and take my time with that. And yeah, I think that is what living free for me means, and being able to follow my own path of inspiration and working on my business and finding the ways in which that feels good to me. And yeah, I think that's freedom for me.
I love that. And if you take us back, how did your life look like before you had this freedom to really do what your body was longing for, and before you could work on your business? How did your life change in these last few years, maybe since we met, but even before that? What was your journey into coming into alignment with your body and your soul?
Yeah, it's really interesting actually, because I've always had quite a lot of time on my hands. I've never walked the conventional path of a 9-to-5 job. When I was living in London, I was working as a waitress in a nightclub, and I was making quite a lot of money. And if I wasn't working at night, I had a lot of free time in the day. But at that time, I didn't know what I know now, and I had no idea how to lead myself. So I would get lost in all this time. I would not know what to do. And this is when I decided to go to Pachamama, because I knew there was so much alive in me, and I had so much creativity, and there were so many dreams and so many things also that didn't work out. But I hadn't made that connection to my own trust and my personal power, and nothing was quite working, and I didn't have the patience to just follow through with something. And then it came to a point where I was like, oh my gosh, I need to get clear on what this all is and what this all means, and how am I gonna follow a path that feels good to me. And so then I decided to go to Pachamama, where I met you. And that, I think, is the first major step for me into coming to alignment. And I was first introduced to breath work there, and then I did a silent meditation retreat there. And yeah, and leading up until that point, I had been reading a lot of books, and that was great, but I needed to feel like I was immersed into something. So I think that was the first major step of really going deep.
I loved it. I remember our time in the jungle. It was so special, and we both had such different experiences. We just talked about it before.
Yeah.
How did your life change after this immersion in the jungle and coming back to your old life? Where did you fall back into old patterns, and where
Yes. This is such a good question, because I was like in the jungle, and I had done all this work, and I had done breath work, and I had cried, and I had purged, and then I had these visions and these ideas. And so when I was in the jungle, I had done all this work on myself, and I felt so high, and I now understand that I had elevated my frequency because of all the work. So it was as if I was on MDMA, you know, my heart was blasted open, and I felt like there was nothing I couldn't do. And then I had all these visions of like, I'm going to come back, and I'm going to take what I've learned and share this with my girls and create women's circles and things like that. And then I came back to London and fell straight back into old patterns. I don't think I had, I had been in the jungle for 3 weeks, and that is a long time, but it wasn't long enough to really anchor these new truths, these new ideas into my ground. It wasn't, and then I didn't integrate it fully, and And so I fell back into old patterns. And I don't think I had matured my inner masculine enough in being able to harness the ideas, create a plan, create a structure for myself, follow through with it, you know. It was just the first tiny baby step onto the path. But back then I was like, great, I've made it, done, you know, never have to do that again. And, you know.
I've done the work.
Yes.
I'm healed.
Yes, exactly. And, you know, and I pursued an acting career for a very long time in London. I had dreams of wanting to become an actress, and that hadn't worked out in the way I had hoped and imagined and dreamed. And, you know, I was battling with a lot of failure, and I had to shed these old dreams, and I hadn't quite got to that point yet. So I came back to London quite unsure of, do I follow this path or do I now continue with acting? And that just wasn't working. And it wasn't working because it was trying to guide me onto this path. And but I didn't know where to begin. I had no idea what to do. And so, yeah, then I fell back into old patterns of numbness, feeling lost, depression. And then I got cancer. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that so openly. And there's so much I would love to dive deeper into. Like, for everyone who's listening, I think everyone can relate to that. We go on a retreat, we go on a spiritual journey, we learn something, we're like, this whole universe opens and we can see things clearly. And then we go back into our old lives. Yeah. And of course, it's the power of osmosis. If we're surrounded by the same people that we got sick before, if we go back into the same place, if we don't integrate it and we become strong from the inside out, we get immersed into old patterns, we get consumed by our old environment. And for me, it was essential to get out of the country I was born in to heal that story, because in that place I couldn't. There was so much interwoven dynamics, that so much I was carrying that wasn't mine, that I couldn't see while I was in it. I had to move to the other side of the world, basically, to be surrounded by the ocean and nothingness for quite a long time to be able to really go to the root. And I feel, yeah, sometimes we think we just go to a retreat and everything is good after. It's a lifelong journey, and it's also the devotion to implement this, the tools that we learn into our everyday lives. We can change everything on the outside. I even moved here and I thought I will finally feel free and peace and appreciate it. But I didn't realize that I had to do the inner work, the deep, messy, painful inner work to see changes on the outside. It always starts within us. Yeah. So what do you think when you look back? So you said it was your environment, your old patterns. Do you think that's related why you got cancer back then?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, actually, because I listened to a podcast the other day where someone explained about how our environment is the cause of most diseases, you know, where we're living and how our environment affects us. And for me, I've always thought that it was because I had completely numbed myself. I didn't feel anything anymore. I didn't know how to honor my own creativity, so nothing was flowing. I was totally consumed with shame and fear and all that stuff, and I had no idea what to do with that. So in a way, I was almost going to say maybe Pachamama spiritual bypassing, and it wasn't actually, because I did go very deep, and I did feel the depth of my feelings there. I just couldn't quite understand it and place it. And then when I came back to London, all these shadows were still there. And it wasn't until I did my spiritual leadership program with my mentor, Alexandra, where I really started to understand, oh, okay, the shadow and the light, these are a part of me, and it's up to me that I learn how to hold it and be with it and let it move through, and that it's always going to be there.
Yeah.
And that my wounds, it's not like, okay, I'm going to do loads of work on this wound and then it's totally going to be healed and I never have to deal with it again. It's this thing of that it resurfaces again and again. And then every time you learn something new and you discover something new. And it took, you mentioned the word devotion earlier, and I was like, it took me a long time to actually devote myself to this path. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of resistance.
Lots of resistance, yes. But it's interesting. When you said I had to move away, that's what we did, but we moved to another city. So that wasn't even that supportive of the path I was meant to walk. You know, we moved to Paris and it was beautiful because it was like, let's move to Paris. And then we did that. But I was as lost in Paris as I was in London.
Yeah. We take everything with us, no matter where we go.
Yeah. So I can't actually imagine a better place to work through your shadows than in paradise, to be honest.
But it's hard too, because in the beginning I was judging myself for feeling that way. You know, you're surrounded by all this beauty. Right. And I judged myself because I thought I'm supposed to feel good with all this, you know, you're in paradise. People would kill to live this life and I feel like I'm dying inside.
Right,
but it was definitely the best place. That's the only place my nervous system ever felt safe enough to go to the deepest wounds from my first months of life and my early childhood.
Wow, that just gave me shivers, actually. That you found a place where you felt safe enough to
really go there. Yeah. And I love what you shared, that you resisted devoting to this path, because our soul knows it's where we meant to go, where we can step into the most embodied, most empowered version of ourselves, where we can serve with our gifts. But there's our human selves that's so attached to people and places, and we hold on to these old identities that we've outgrown, but because they are connected to people and to places, and we're afraid if they fall away, what happens, that we cling on to these versions. And for me, this was huge this year too, to allow the grief of these versions to come up. Like, of course, I had an amazing life living in Germany. I was guiding retreats all around the world. I was connected with people. I had a life that felt really good, but my soul knew there was something more waiting for me. And I didn't know what it was, but I needed to trust. And when I came here, it's not that everything was butterflies and rainbow. I needed to let go of this version. I just sold everything I ever owned in Germany. I said goodbye to people that I didn't know when to see, to my family. Like, there was so much happening, and I was still holding on to that old version of me, you know, to the Tanya that was living in Germany. And only when I let her die, by trusting that the version that I'm stepping into is even more powerful and beautiful and radiating and serving, and that was connected to a lot of grief. There were waves of grief where suddenly I felt the loss of a friend that I thought we would spend a lifetime with. There was a loss of me being, you know, so easygoing with everyone and being connected. And then suddenly I was so alone here in the beginning. There was so much connected to this process. And I love that you talk about this so openly, that you also went through this, that you resisted, because it's a scary path to walk. But if we really let go, that's when the magic happens, and that's when you come back to your natural magnetism. And I would love to dive deeper into this topic with you, because I know you're creating a program right now, and we just talked about it before, that we always go through it first, and we almost create it for ourselves so we can share it with the world. Every single program we create, we go through the initiation first. So what was your intention behind Feminine Magnetism? What's your story around that?
Okay, where shall I begin with this? So let's just be super transparent. I did my so after cancer, I did 4 women retreats with Sarah. You know Sarah, yes. And then and they were beautiful, and we created them purely out of inspiration, you know, out of this thing of I am sick, which makes you then realize even more things. And it's like, oh my gosh, we have to come together, and we have to eat good food, and we have to, you know, be together. And then after these retreats, I was like, I need some support. Like, I need some guidance with this work and going deeper. So I found my mentor. I did my spiritual leadership training for a year long, where I was trained to become an embodiment coach. And then this program was done, and then I was like, okay, now what? You know, how do I bring my gifts into the world? How do I offer? How do I even create an offer, you know? And so there was another girl in this program, and she asked me to create a program with her, and I just said yes. And this is there's a beauty in there is this beautiful quote that there is magic in boldness, and like I can't remember the quote, but we had no idea what we were doing, you know, but we followed inspiration. We showed up for it every day. And if you show up for something every day, you make yourself available, and then things start to communicate with you, and all of a sudden the pieces come together, and you've created a program, you know. So this was amazing. But then this whole idea on how to find clients. Now you have this beautiful program, you need to find clients. And we then followed a program by this guy called Paul Orlando, and he's amazing. But he teaches us a very masculine approach. And in the beginning, I was like, oh my God, this is great because it's working. And we had no idea how to do this. And all of a sudden we had this strategy and it was working. And then by the end of the year, something started to feel really misaligned for me, where it's all of a sudden this danger where you fall into this place of only striving and doing and thinking about how to expand and grow through constantly doing. And I was just totally disconnected from my energy, from me, from why I was doing it in the first place. And so I was like, and then I decided that I wanted to go solo. So me and my partner decided to part ways, and we did that with a lot of love. I created Path of the Lioness, but I was like, before I dive into this, I need to do my own work first. And then I found another mentor, a woman, and then she taught me the energetics behind all of this and the importance about it is you. It has to be you. It has to come from you. You have to feel good. You have to feel alive. You know, the offer essentially is you. And so from this year of like doing and claiming success and seeing it work, I was feeling more and more disconnected. And that was totally defeating the purpose. And so I had to awaken to this idea that I go first, and that I have to feel as alive as possible, and that I need to feel as connected to myself as possible, and sharing what is moving through me, and to stay connected to that integrity and authenticity. So I realized, I was like, oh, it's the feminine. That's the feminine. And I learned that the feminine in her essence, she is magic. And she is magic by just being. She doesn't have to do anything for it. She just is magic. But we often are so disconnected from that power because we're so consumed in the mind and in the how we need to do something, and in the doing, you know. And I love this idea of fully coming back to my feminine and fully connecting to the essence of my being, and letting that energy work for me. So that's how Feminine Magnetism was born. And yeah, it's for me, basically.
I love that so much. And I was in a San Pedro ceremony a few weeks ago. And this was basically the essence that I saw and felt in that ceremony. I literally became a goddess and then turned into a flower, and I could feel the essence of us women. We are like a flower. By us just being, that's the beauty and the gift that we can bring to the world. But we are so dimmed down by, it's like the flower closes and tries to control and has to know and is full of fear that she can't shine. Yeah. But this is our natural essence, especially amongst women. Flowers don't compare each other. They just shine and they're radiating the beauty. And that's when the bees come. They don't come when the flower is closed.
Yes.
And I've really we all know this, right? We know the feminine essence is open and receptive, but by feeling that, I was that flower, wet and open and receptive. And the sentence that came, I don't need to do anything. I just am. I just need to be.
Yeah.
To get what I want. Of course, there's a lot more to that. We all both need the masculine and the feminine to create life, but the feminine in its essence doesn't need to prove, she doesn't compare, she doesn't hustle. It all fell away in the second. When I felt this flower, I was like, oh my God, it all makes sense now. But we are so conditioned to be in our minds, to judge ourselves, to judge others, to talk behind each other's backs, to always hustle through life, to always have to know what the outcome is going to be. And if we don't work through this, if we don't connect to our feminine essence, we take the same patterns that we had in our 9-to-5 job into our businesses. And in the beginning, I was in that. I had a hard time to rest. I was the same as you. I had all this time, but I didn't know what to do. I felt guilty for being so, in my trauma recovery, just being exhausted all the time. I felt lazy. I felt like I'm doing something wrong. This is never going to work. This spiraling of shame and doubt and worries. And then it just hit me like, wow, we don't need to do. We are our most radiant selves if we connect and feel safe in our essence. And I'm curious, when you created this program, what can you share with the women if they feel like, yeah, that's me. Actually, I feel like I'm not in my feminine essence. How can I come back to my natural magnetism? What can I do in my everyday life to connect back to that?
The first thing that's coming to mind is coming into stillness. Just coming into stillness. The stillness of deep meditation, when you are just being, that is meditation. The intention of meditation is to just be and not do. Yeah, and then the second thing, it is the spiritual practices, right, that cultivate these particular energies. And it's in the practices where we free ourselves from the conditioned layers and the repetitive loops of negative thinking and the shame and the doubt and the fear. And in practice, you free yourself of that for a moment. And in that freedom, you actually create a new reality for yourself. So I would suggest the importance of connecting yourself with a spiritual practice every day. Yeah, I think 2 years to come into full connection with the embodiment practice. And that now I see this practice as an incredible tool that I can literally whip out whenever I need. But it's taken me so long to connect with that in such a deep way, and to trust that, to trust that will give me everything that I need. Like the other day on Friday, I had this incredible day. I felt on top of the world. I felt in my power. I was so embodied, and I was like, oh my God, amazing. Let's keep this momentum going. And then the next day I plummeted again. I have no idea why. And so I was like, okay, I will drop into practice. And yes, there it was, instant sobbing. And I'm like, oh my God, if it wasn't for this practice, then I would just be carrying and holding that in. But I did think yesterday, it took me so long to really embed this into my life. And that is sometimes, I think, the patience and the consistency in showing up, and the trust, like keep showing up, keep doing the practice, keep connecting deeper, don't have any expectations, and then eventually things are going to click more and more.
Thank you for sharing. And I feel that's something most of us are not even aware, that we carry so many suppressed emotions. I realized that actually just before I came to Pachamama in Costa Rica, I had a wild journey before that. Like, I was breaking up with the love of my life that I thought we're gonna marry and have children. And only 3 months later, I went into an emotional abusive relationship. We created a yoga studio together. And then just before I came to Pachamama or to the teacher training, I lost everything. I decided to leave this relationship, and I was smashed into a million pieces. Like, my self-worth, my self-love was just not existent anymore. I had to rebuild myself from -100. And then I went into the jungle in Costa Rica for the teacher training first. And I remember I was sitting in a morning meditation, and suddenly it felt like a frozen canal opened, and the grief from the second relationship, from the first one, not the abusive one, the one before, I never felt that grief of losing the love of my life, of shedding the dream that we would, have this life together that we always dreamed about. And I never allowed myself to feel that. 1.5 years later in the jungle, this canal froze. And I went into the ocean. I just couldn't stop crying. I felt all this grief that was suppressed in my body for 1.5 years. And it just came out for hours. I kept on crying. I went into the ocean naked. I gave my tears back to the ocean. I finally felt that pain. And I wasn't aware that I was carrying that. In my mind, I thought, I'm fine. I closed that chapter. It's all good. And this happened with so many emotions. Some of my first months of life, there were suppressed emotions. And we carry it in our bodies. And only if we release these emotions, it gets easier in our everyday lives too. It's not that every single time that I feel something, it can immediately bubble up. Sometimes I have moments where there's a few days where I feel something is moving, but I can't really access it yet. And then we do the practices and it gets easier. But this is a lifelong journey. And sometimes we have more access to it and sometimes we don't. But I also feel this is one key ingredient if we want to return back to our natural essence, to our feminine being. We have to access our emotional layer and to release what's stuck there. There's no way, no tiptoeing around that. You can do all the embodiment practices in the world. If you don't open yourself to release what's lingering, what's stuck, what's messy, what's painful, you can't be radiant, because there's so much density in your whole being.
Totally. And the feminine feels that she feels.
And expresses, even if it's messy.
We don't go to our body in the heart. Yes, exactly. And that's why we don't go there, right? That's why I stayed so in my mind, because I didn't dare. I didn't dare go there.
Even if it's numb and it's not fulfilling and alive, if we live in our heads, it's easier. It feels more safe, because we know if we go there, it can
we enter into the wilderness. The
underground. So what can you, if someone's listening and they feel like, yes, I'm on that journey, but I'm not quite ready yet, but I desire to feel more feminine, to feel more radiant, to come more into my feminine magnetism. I want to attract the desires that I deeply long for. I don't want to chase them. How can they know that something needs to change? Like, what were the patterns that you had that made you realize, okay, I'm actually, even if I think I'm very feminine, I'm still in this wounded masculine, operating my life from hustling and not being able to pause and feel and express and surrender?
So what were my patterns, my toxic masculine?
How did you realize there's something not in alignment with what you want and how you're being?
Right, just not feeling disconnected from myself, not feeling that aliveness within myself of like, oh yeah, here she is, here I am, I'm here, I know who I am, you know, and just feeling that connection, that just fully embodied in who I am. And if you do not feel, and we can't feel that 100% of the day, you know, but you know when you are disconnected and when you're constantly numb. Okay, yeah, and I guess a pattern I always had is I would use food as constant distractions. Yeah.
For me, it's the phone. I always go on my phone. If I don't want to feel something, I go on my phone. I get so sucked up into my phone that I'm like, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I love that. There was something I wanted to share, but it's gone now. Yeah, to really allow ourselves to go there without fear. I feel that I was so afraid of my darkness in the past. I was running away from my pain, from my side that felt unlovable, from this inner little baby girl that felt like she doesn't belong, she's a burden, she's not worthy of love, she's like she has to fight to get a piece of the cake. That version, I was shutting her off my whole life. And only when I really went deep into this pain and I felt her pain and I nurtured this little baby girl, that's when I came back into wholeness, because I stopped looking for things outside of myself. I stopped longing for love because I could give my love. I think that's the root of the abandonment wound, right? We are so afraid of being abandoned, but actually the only person we're abandoning is our little girl that just longs to be loved. And that's also for me connected to the feminine magnetism, that we stop chasing. Everything that's chasing is not feminine. If we remember this picture, everything that attracts from wholeness and beauty and radiance, that's the feminine magnetism. And every time we try to grab and to reach out and to chase, because otherwise we don't feel whole, that's when I always realize, okay, I'm out of alignment. I'm actually pushing too hard in my business now. I'm not in my magnetism anymore. And that's when it's an awareness to always come back to that feeling of being alive. And even in the purest expression, like even in a self-pleasure practice, it's not always orgasms, it's sometimes deep pain that comes up and deep releases. But in this pain, there's the spark of aliveness that comes back. Even if you're crying your eyes out, it's aliveness that comes back.
Yes, that's exactly what I felt when you shared about standing in the ocean and giving your tears. And there's actually such a beauty in the depth of pain, because for me, whenever I'm crying, it's a proof of something so real, something so true. The tears, it's like I can feel my tears rolling down my cheeks. This is so real. This is me at my rawest, purest form, and then I come into such deep connection, and even though I feel pain, I am so happy to feel connected again. And the depth at which you feel your pain is then your ability to feel your pleasure. I never forgot that. I was like, oh damn, that makes so much sense. You know, when you repress one, you repress the other, and that's why we become numb. And that's when people start drinking and taking drugs or overeating and all these things that come in to either create a feeling or deny a feeling, when all we need to do is just go inward and learn how to be with our emotional life.
Exactly.
And that is what gives us our aliveness, and what gives us this depth and meaning that we're all yearning for. And then I've been diving deep into the meaning behind manifestation and how that truly works. And the things that I've been learning recently about manifestation is so powerful, is that we manifest our desires into reality and our dreams into reality through how we feel. It is the feeling behind the desire that makes you a match for the thing you desire. So it's about knowing how to create emotions, elevate emotions. And you cannot do that if you are ignoring and rejecting your pain. It's like, okay, I'm going into this pain. And then also knowing the deeper I feel this pain, the more pleasure I'm going to feel and the better my life is going to be, in a way, you know? It's like, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. So true. And I feel our society is so programmed on only chasing the light, and every religion, the darkness is the evil, you know, the devil. Like, don't even think about that. It's only the light, only the ascending. But we need to descend into our bodies, and we need to befriend our darkness. Every single soul on this planet has a dark side. Every single soul on this planet has doubts and fears and things that feel unbearable. And the more we meet those parts, the more we can feel the whole spectrum that life has to offer. But of course, if we're afraid of the darkness, we will numb ourselves and distract and protect our hearts with all these layers that are unhealthy but normal in our society. And only if we are brave enough to walk this path and to hold ourselves in the fullness, in the deepest pain, is it is with the same open heart as the pleasure that we so long for. And that's when I feel this is what makes life worth living, that we experience all of it and not just chasing the light all the time, chasing the good feelings and making ourselves feel bad for having bad emotions. Like, it's all of it. And the more we can embrace that, the more magnetic we become.
Yeah, it's so true. It makes you interesting and mysterious too, if you have this darker edge and you know how to be with it, right? And not being afraid of it, and also having the courage to share and talk about it. But one interesting thing though that I came into realization recently was I started to focus so much on my darkness that actually in that I started to give it a lot of power too. And so I found myself going into certain loops and not being able to move forwards and free myself into bigger things. I was just a bit stuck in these there's almost this idea of identifying myself through the wounds and the darkness, and this idea that I have to go through the darkness first before I can get to the light. And there comes a point where, yes, we have to do our shadow work and we have to learn how to hold both with equal power and respect and honor. But then there does come a point when you have done so much work on yourself and your inner darkness that there should be a discernment of like, okay, am I going to focus? Keep focusing on this? Because what happened with me in my journaling practice, I got into a habitual pattern of writing about on my shadows, on my wounds, understanding it, analyzing it, wanting to understand it a little bit better, because then I think I would be a little bit better, and then I would feel a bit better, I would feel a bit more powerful. This idea that I have to work through the shadows first before I can then reward myself with the light. And that is not necessarily true either. And of course, there are a lot of people who are constantly going for the light, and that's the spiritual bypassers, but you know, like I can see you are doing your work. I know I'm doing my work. And then for me, there came a point where I was like, okay, enough now. Enough of the shadow. I need to build myself up. I need to give my light power, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I started very consciously changing my journaling practice and really focusing on everything that makes me amazing. Mm. And that's, you know, also anchoring me in that sense of abundance, the abundance of who I am and being enough. And then that indirectly, that stops that need of wanting to chase, because it's like, oh, I am everything already. I'm amazing. I have come this far, you know?
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. thank you for this conversation, Melinte. I loved talking with you about all the things we went into, all the different places.
My absolute pleasure.
I have one last question for you that I ask all of my podcast guests, and I want you to close your eyes for this one. And imagine yourself as a younger version, and normally an intuitive age pops up. If you could tell your younger version something you learned along the way that would have helped you immensely, what would you share with her right now?
I would share with her to trust herself, that she has all the answers and that she doesn't need any permission and she doesn't need to look for the validation of others. And that she can fully trust herself.
Beautiful. What age did you see?
8.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
How can people connect with you, find your magic?
So people can connect with me through Instagram, which is Melinte, MELINTE _ Path of the Lioness. And yeah, that's where you can reach me.
I will also link it in the show notes. Thank you so much for the conversation.
My absolute pleasure.